This isn't just a story. It's a journey, one that'll stay with you long after the video ends. So if you've ever felt love, loss, betrayal, or hope, then stay with us. Because this story deserves to be heard from the very first second to the very last. If this video moves you, even for a moment, please give it a like. Leave a comment telling us which part hit you the hardest, and share it with someone who needs to feel something real today. And if you love stories that are raw, emotional, and unforgettable, then subscribe to the channel, because we don't just tell stories here. We bring them to life. Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Lena's Stories. How have you been? Have you been nurturing your dreams lately? Today's story explores themes of healing, responsibility, and the courage to love, even when it feels terrifying. Lena Carter, a vibrant and visionary creative director in high fashion, and Jake Bennett, a stoic and calculated CEO, both represent ambition and emotional resilience. However, one unexpected night, unplanned and unspoken, sparked a journey neither of them saw coming. A journey that wouldn't just alter their futures, but force them to confront who they truly were. So, take a breath with me. Let me tell you a story, one that didn't begin with love, not even hope, but with one quiet, unforeseen night. It was celebration night at Mason Vera, a luxury fashion powerhouse based in Chicago. The company had just broken nationwide sales records thanks to its groundbreaking campaign, The Real Shape, led by none other than Lena Carter. At just 27, she wasn't merely the youngest creative director in the firm's history. She was rewriting the playbook. Everyone around her celebrated. Music, laughter, champagne, but Lena, in a deep sapphire satin gown, stood silently beside the towering windows on the 42nd floor, gazing at the glowing city. The skyline sparkled like scattered gold dust, millions of stories unfolding below. Yet her own heart felt still. Maybe success didn't always quiet the ache inside. Quite the view, came a low voice behind her. Jake Bennett, the man behind the empire. 36, sharp, strategic, untouchable. The kind of man who never needed to raise his voice because his presence said everything. He wore his authority like a custom-fitted suit. Impeccable, undeniable. Congratulations, he said simply. No charm, no flattery, just sincerity. They stood in silence for a while. Then they spoke. First about work, numbers, projections, campaign reach. But gradually, the conversation shifted into something gentler. Lena shared stories about her mother, a nurse who raised her alone, working double shifts just to keep the lights on, yet never failed to show love. Jake paused before offering pieces of his own past. His father, a rigid, unyielding man obsessed with legacy, believed vulnerability was a flaw. And his mother? She was quiet, he said. Eventually, she disappeared into that silence. There was no music, no flickering candlelight, just a shared bottle of wine and two people on a leather couch talking as if it were neutral territory, listening, slowly unraveling, and then just a kiss, soft, slow, followed by silence, not from passion, not even romance, but because in that fleeting moment, they weren't CEO and director. They were simply two weary souls, no longer willing to face the night alone. Some truths don't need to be shouted. Two faint pink lines were enough to shatter Lena Carter's sense of control. 6 weeks after that night, she sat curled on the cool tile floor of her River North apartment's bathroom. The third pregnancy test trembled in her hand. All three read the same word, positive, the kind of positive that turns your entire life upside down. She stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the polished, composed Lena the world admired. Her curls were a mess, her lips pale, eyes wide with fear. "Carter, women don't break," she whispered. "We bend, and then we rise." Her mother had done it, alone, at night, in hospital halls. She had shown Lena that survival wasn't about being the strongest. It was about choosing to keep going, even when everything inside you begged to give up. So Lena stood up, wiped her tears, pulled on a flawless navy pantsuit, and went to work at the office. She moved like clockwork, meetings, presentations, emails, but the nausea was getting worse. And every time she crossed paths with Jake Bennett in the hallway, her stomach tightened, not because of the baby, but because of all the silence between them. They hadn't talked about that night. Not once. Until Monday morning, after a long and draining strategy session, Jake said the words she'd been waiting for and dreading. "Carter, a word." In my office. Her heart skipped. Her fingers tightened around her folder. But she walked in, head high. He didn't look up from his laptop. She stood silently, tension thick. He opened his mouth to speak, but she beat him to it. "I'm pregnant." He didn't look up as he typed on his laptop. Lena stood waiting, the tension between them thick and sharp. He opened his mouth, but she spoke first. "I'm pregnant." Flat, direct, like ripping off a bandage. Jake's fingers froze mid-keystroke. Slowly, he looked up, really looked at her. "Are you sure?" "3 tests," she replied. "I'll confirm with the doctor." Silence stretched between them, heavy and unrelenting. Then he leaned back in his chair, folded his hands together, and asked, "What do you want?" It wasn't curiosity in his voice. It was caution, as if preparing for impact. "If it's money, support, a promotion, just tell me." It wasn't his words that shattered her. It was his tone, like she was a problem, a crisis to contain. Lena's eyes flashed. Her voice was steady but laced with fire. "I don't want your money, Jake. I don't want anything from you. I just thought you deserved to know." She turned and walked out. Her steps were firm. Her heart, not so much. Jake Bennett prided himself on control. Over numbers, over people, over outcomes. Even emotions, to him, were simply variables to manage. In his world, feelings were distractions, weaknesses. But after Lena's quiet, cutting words, "I just thought you deserved to know," Jake didn't move. He sat frozen in the morning light of his office, a light that suddenly felt too cold. He didn't chase after her, didn't call her name. He just sat there, the weight of her words anchoring him in silence. Lena walked quickly down the hallway, her pulse hammering in her chest. But she didn't cry, not because she wasn't hurting, but because she'd long stopped placing hope in men like him. She hadn't expected him to chase her, or apologize, or even care. But what wounded her was the way he looked at her, like she was a glitch in his perfect system. That afternoon, Lena submitted a formal request to transfer to the company's California office. She wasn't quitting. She wasn't running. She simply wanted space to become a mother without the stares, the silences, the weight of a man who couldn't show up but still tried to control things from afar. 1 week later, Jake called her into his office again. "I received your transfer request," he said. "I'll begin handing off my projects this week," she replied calmly. He nodded, but something in his face had changed. It wasn't cold. It wasn't soft either. It was conflicted. "Why are you leaving?" he asked, this time quieter. "Less CEO, more man." "Because I need space," she said. "And because I don't want my child growing up with a father who isn't present. but still tries to pull the strings. He didn't respond. Lena stood to leave, but at the door, she paused and turned back. You know, Jake, she said steadily, I once thought maybe underneath all that ice you were a good man. He looked up at her. But maybe I was wrong. Her voice wasn't accusing. It wasn't angry. It was just disappointed. Raw. Honest. But that's okay, she added, her gaze unwavering. I grew up with an amazing mother. I didn't need a father to become who I am. And neither will my child. Then she walked out. No shaking hands. No hesitation. Jake remained seated, but something inside him cracked open. For the first time in years, he felt something new. Loss. Not because he was losing a top-tier employee. Jake Bennett grew up in a house where emotions were treated like diseases. His father, a respected lawyer, valued achievement as the only legitimate form of love. Expressions of emotion were punished, not welcomed. His mother, she was always there physically, but emotionally she had vanished long ago. Her silence wasn't soothing. It was suffocating. It built a wall around their family that Jake unknowingly carried into every adult relationship. He had never told anyone this, not until his first therapy session, when the therapist asked, "Why are you here?" Jake's answer was short, but honest. I don't want to become him. That moment cracked something open, and from then on, Jake began learning everything from the ground up: how to sit with discomfort instead of running from it, how to feel pain without immediately trying to fix or control it, how to understand that maybe, just maybe, control wasn't strength. Sometimes it was just fear in a tailored suit. Late one night, after tossing and turning with guilt and uncertainty, he wrote an email to Lena. He didn't edit it 100 times. He didn't rehearse it in his head. He just wrote from his heart. It read, "I'm trying to change, not for anyone else, but because I don't want to hurt anyone again. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but if you're willing, I'd like to learn how to show up." No dramatic words. No manipulation. Just honesty. Lena didn't respond right away, but the next day she accepted his coffee invitation. No expectations. No promises. Just a quiet cafe in a quiet neighborhood. Not to rekindle anything, but to see, just maybe, if the man who disappointed her was really trying to be better. Jake arrived early. He ordered ginger tea and plain crackers. He had read somewhere that they helped with morning sickness. When Lena walked in, her posture was guarded. She scanned the cafe, her face unreadable. But when her eyes landed on the tea and the little plate of crackers waiting for her, something in her expression softened. Just a little. They didn't talk about that night. They didn't bring up what had been said or left unsaid. They talked about her OB-GYN, her upcoming checkups, what it felt like the first time she heard a heartbeat that wasn't hers. Jake didn't pretend to understand. He didn't try to fix anything. He just listened. And for Lena in that moment, a man who could sit and listen without control, without logic, without masks, that was already a beginning. No grand gestures. No apologies wrapped in roses. Just something real. Neither of them expected the storm to come so soon. It hit, loud, brutal, and without warning. Just days after that quiet meeting, Lena was packing up her office, preparing for her transfer to California, when her closest colleague, Mia, rushed in, her face pale. "Have you seen the news?" she gasped, holding up her phone. The headline burned across the screen. Mason Vera CEO in alleged affair with subordinate. Stock drops amid scandal. Lena froze. The article didn't just mention her and Jake. It twisted everything. It painted her pregnancy as the result of a backroom deal, called her a manipulator, accused her of trading intimacy for advancement. Even her transfer was portrayed as a strategic escape. The cruelty of those words cut deeper than anything Jake had ever said. This wasn't just about her career. It was about her dignity, her identity as a woman who had clawed her way to the top, fairly, fiercely. Her phone lit up with texts, calls, anonymous messages. But Lena didn't cry. She adjusted her blouse, took a long breath, and walked straight to Jake Bennett's office, knowing what she'd find on the other side. Inside, Jake sat with legal and PR teams. His face turned grave when he saw her. "I'm sorry," he said softly, and for the first time, his voice held no command, only regret. The PR spokesperson turned to her. "We're drafting a statement. We'll deny everything. Say there was no relationship, that the transfer was personal." But before Lena could speak, Jake stood. His voice wasn't loud, but it was resolute. "No, we're not lying. We're not hiding. And we're definitely not letting anyone shame the mother of my child. But because a woman who once believed in him, who once saw goodness in him, no longer did." Some shocks don't come from screaming matches or slammed doors. Some come from silence. The kind of silence someone leaves behind when they walk out of your life. And for Jake Bennett, that silence carried Lena Carter's name, or leverage to earn her place in this company. Lena Carter is one of the most capable professionals I've ever worked with, and the first person who's ever made me question the kind of man I want to be. The room fell silent, stunned. Then, unexpectedly, the CFO, usually the quietest person at the table, spoke. "We stand by your decision," he said simply. One by one, heads nodded around the boardroom. That afternoon, Lena didn't walk out of the building as the center of a scandal. She walked out as a woman who had defended her dignity and stood her ground in the middle of chaos. And Jake Bennett, the man who once lived for control and image, had done something he never believed he would. He chose the truth. He chose her. He chose their child. 3 days before her scheduled move to California, just as Lena thought the storm had finally passed, her body said otherwise. It started in the middle of a Zoom meeting with her future team. A sudden wave of dizziness. Her vision blurred. Voices faded. And then, darkness. She woke up in a hospital bed, and 4 in her arm. A doctor's voice calm, but firm. "Your blood pressure spiked too quickly. We need to monitor you closely. Travel is not recommended right now." Lena nodded, swallowing tears, not from fear, but from exhaustion, the kind that builds up after you've been holding everything together for too long. She turned her head to the side. On the bedside table sat a freshly printed ultrasound photo. A tiny form, a heartbeat, still strong. She placed her hand gently over the image and whispered, "Please stay safe, little one." Jake didn't find out through HR or medical updates. He heard it from Charlotte, his younger sister. She called him at 5 a.m. while he was reviewing quarterly projections. "You should know," she said bluntly, "Lena was admitted to the hospital last night. Alone." That last word, alone, hit like a slap. He didn't ask questions, didn't make a plan. He just moved. No logistics, no strategy, just instinct. For the first time, Jake wasn't the CEO who calculated every decision. He was a man who realized he couldn't live with repeating his father's absence. Not this time. 3 hours later, Jake walked into the hospital, still in his suit, hair tousled from a rushed flight. When he stepped into the room, Lena was sitting upright in bed, propped against pillows. Her eyes widened in surprise. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice flat. "Being here," he said quietly. No explanations. No business tone. Just presence. When the nurse came in to check Lena's vitals, Jake stayed. He didn't ask questions. Didn't offer solutions. He simply held her hand, gently, warmly, honestly. And for the first time in weeks, Lena didn't feel the need to be strong. She wasn't a director. She wasn't a strategist. She was just a woman. Scared. Tired. And the man she once believed incapable of tenderness was sitting beside her, not out of duty, but because he wanted to be there. After the checkup, they sat together in silence, bathed in the soft hospital light. Then Jake turned to her and said, "I'm not running this time. And if you'll let me, I'll stay. For as long as it takes." Lena looked at him, not searching for lies, just reading his face. And what she saw wasn't the cold, untouchable CEO. It was a man still learning, still flawed, but trying with everything he had to love in the only way he knew how. And for the first time in months, she nodded. Not because she had. Jake stayed by her side through every checkup. He didn't ask questions, didn't fill the silence. He just was there. And then, on an early March morning, while the city still slept under a blanket of fog, their daughter arrived. After over 8 grueling hours of labor, Lena Carter was finally rewarded with the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby girl's first cry. Jake stood beside her, gloved hands trembling, eyes wide and shining with something he didn't yet have a name for. Maybe it was awe. The doctor gently placed the baby in his arms first. She was tiny, her face flushed, eyes still shut, but the moment her tiny fingers wrapped around one of his, something shifted, as if she were saying, "I know you're here." Jake froze, not in fear, but in surrender. For the first time in his life, the world didn't revolve around numbers, titles, or legacy. He was just a man, holding the most important thing he'd ever touched. When he passed the baby to Lena, they didn't say anything. They didn't have to. Their eyes met, and for a brief, sacred moment, tears filled them both, quiet, warm, and real. "She's beautiful," Lena whispered, her fingers gently brushing the baby's cheek. "Her name is Sophie. Sophie Bennett Carter." Jake repeated the name softly, almost reverently. Sophie Bennett Carter. Like a promise. A new beginning. Lena's recovery was slow. Her body needed time. But Jake didn't leave. Not because he had to, but because something inside him wouldn't let him be anywhere else. He changed diapers, learned how to swaddle, took midnight shifts holding Sophie while Lena rested. Sometimes he just sat next to the crib, listening to Sophie's soft breaths, watching her chest rise and fall, letting the noise of the world fade into silence. Lena didn't speak of the future. She didn't need to. There was still space between them. Still wounds not yet healed. But something was softening. Every time she saw Jake hold their daughter, with clumsy fingers and reverent care, something inside her softened too. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was trust. And for Lena, trust meant everything. When they were finally discharged from the hospital, they didn't walk out hand in hand. They didn't kiss. But they walked side by side, like two people who were willing to try, not for romance, not for some picture-perfect ending, but for a little girl with sleepy eyes and a name that meant clarity. No rings, no vows, just a glance shared between two people that said, "We'll do this. Maybe not perfectly, but with every bit of goodness we have." Thank you for staying till the end of this story. If something in this tale stirred something within you, let us know in the comments. And remember, Love doesn't always begin with fireworks. Sometimes it begins with silence, steady hands, and a choice to stay.